What's going on, everyone? Starting a little bit early tonight, but of course, I always want to welcome you to another BG-Cast Wednesday live podcast. Tonight, I have a really special guest. Honestly, to be 100% honest, his memes are what kind of got me following him at first. But after digging into his YouTube channel and seeing the wavelength that he's truly on, I decided that I have got to have this guy on. We have got to have a discussion, and we need to break down some stuff on esotericism, consciousness, the occult, mystery schools, lost civilizations. For all of you guys that have been with me for the 2 years BG Cast has been running, you know this is my specialty. This is what I love to talk about, and these are the things that I love to dive deep into. So nonetheless, without further ado, let me introduce my guest, Tyler from the Fourth Way YouTube channel. What is going on, man? Thanks for joining me tonight.
Hey, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's very awesome when I get to sit down with somebody on the same wavelength as me, and we can discuss these topics and we can start breaking it down for people so they can understand and resonate with it on a deeper level. I feel like as of lately, there's a lot of people, especially people like yourself, that are coming out and are able to explain these concepts in a way that everybody can understand and everybody can get in on and, kind of start to work with and practice, man. So I want to give credit where credit's due on that. Thank you for your work on that. But really the first thing I want to start off with, like I do with everybody who's here on BG Cast for the first time, I want to talk about that pivotal moment in your life, whether it be an experience, whether it be some kind of trauma, whether it be or just an idea one day that there is more to this than meets the eye and what we're being shown. So I call it that burning bush moment, the one that kind of turned us all over. So if you don't mind me asking, let's start off with that. What was that pivotal moment in your life that kind of opened your eyes to consciousness and the esoteric side of life?
So for me, I think it was psychedelics that kind of first opened my eyes. I This was probably a little over 10 years ago. Um, I'm nearly 40, so I was like in my late 20s at that point, and really hadn't questioned the nature of reality up until that point, other than I was pretty heavily questioning the nature of religion, which is something close to questioning the nature of reality, the nature of
I would
God,
agree with
those
that.
types of
Yeah.
things. But I wasn't necessarily questioning, the nature of, everything. But, and I wasn't really, I was kind of going through a bit of a nihilistic phase. So I wasn't even really interested in spirituality or God or anything like that. Um, Even though earlier as a child and as an adolescent I went pretty hardcore into theology and Christianity and just thinking about God at a very high level, very deeply, very philosophically. I kind of got burnt out on that and kind of went through a nihilistic phase. So by the time I got to my late 20s, I was not even really looking anymore, didn't really care at that point. And so psychedelics were really just something that seemed like they would be fun. And I really didn't have any knowledge of the history of psychedelics or anything like that. I literally
Mhm.
just was like, okay, this could be fun. So I kind of go into it completely unprepared. And my first trip, it's like I got swallowed by like almost like a void made of rainbows or something like that. But
I understand.
and it kind of I would experience an extreme degree of like synesthesia, or however you say it, where like all of your senses start blending together, and I could see that taste and touch and sight, these are all the same thing.
Mhm.
They're all connected at some level, and everything was one thing. And that's kind of when I opened my eyes to the what I think is one of the most kind of fundamental secrets, but not secrets, which is the unity of everything. Um,
Mhm.
and even though, and that kind of broke my nihilistic streak, because once I saw the unity of everything, I was like, oh, this is God, this is religion, this is everything that I'd been thinking about for years in a different context, and here it all is right here in this wormhole. So I had a number of psychedelic experiences like throughout the time that were slightly different, that kind of gave me slightly different experiences, but they were all very meaningful to me, and they all kind of gave me a sense of, there's something larger here, there's something deeper here, there's something unified here, and there's a deeper knowledge here than I've been aware of. And it's like suddenly all of these different systems of like sacred knowledge started finding me, and like I wasn't even looking for them. They just like different paths, different techniques, and different ideas just started showing up. And I just started learning, which ideas resonated with me, which ideas didn't, which ideas were helpful now, which ideas might be helpful later, those types of things. And I just kind of started to sort my life out according to a new way of looking at everything. And I kind of found the fourth way as part of that journey, and as well as a large number of other kind of esoteric and religious texts that I burned through. I've probably read in the last 10 years, like, I don't know, thousands of books. I don't really know how many, but I've kind of torn through so much literature. It's really been insane. So
I totally get it, man. It's as somebody else who is a entheogen enthusiast, and that these psychedelic compounds have been a integral part of my experience up until today as well. No, I can completely understand where you're coming from and the experiences that you had. I truly feel that these compounds, they, a lot of people discuss the differences. Some people think they take you to a different realm, or they take you to a more subtle realm, or they just remove the blinders of the ego that kind of shelter and like cover our consciousness from experiencing these other subtle realms. They're all essentially surrounding us. They're always here. But what these compounds do is they just remove these blinders so we can perceive that. I mean, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's something, ego dissolving and kind of perspective unifying with psychedelics. I don't know exactly what the method is, but yeah, it's definitely it's definitely a spiritual effect within the material world. That's kind of what's interesting to me. It's almost like we've become so materialistic. It almost took a chemical, a material to wake us back up to our spirituality.
I would agree with that, man. And I think it's very funny because we saw this resurgence in psychedelic use. I mean, it kind of began at the turn of the century, and a lot of people have described many collective awakenings that have occurred. I mean, there was a supposed collective awakening after the Carrington event in the late 1800s. A lot of people state that the energy from the sun kind of re-sparked like the spiritual spark of the human collective. And I mean, you do see this. You see the Theosophy Society kind of open up in the late 1800s, with Madame Blavatsky and all of that. And then you see a lot of this different kind of esoteric information, and it leads right into kind of the resurgence of psychedelics. I find that very interesting, man. Well, since we're kind of on the topic, let's start off with this real quick. So the Gurdjieff experiments, or the Gurdjieff experiments. So I was definitely checking out your video on that. I found that profoundly fascinating. If you don't mind, for our viewers who have not heard about this just yet, just kind of giving a little bit of an outline of what these experiments were, and we'll kind of dive into some different things about them and your thoughts on drugs and consciousness.
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I should probably preface this with, this was not Gurdjieff's normal method of operation. This was a very unique thing that he did with one group of students. And it's not recorded that he did it with anyone else, although it's possible he did it and just wasn't recorded. But He worked with many hundreds of students, and so this was more of a rare case that he did for special reasons. But he worked with, I think this was in the 30s, I believe, somewhere around that time frame. Gurdjieff was in Paris, and he became friends with a few women that lived in Paris. They were mostly American women, and they were mostly lesbian American writers. So they were all like literary, authors writing novels in Paris, mostly expats, Americans. And there was a group of, I don't remember exactly, 6 to 8 of them, something like that. And they had heard of Gurdjieff, and they wanted him to help them kind of expand their level of consciousness. So Gurdjieff said that he would help them, and he took them on as students. And we don't know exactly what he was giving them, but we do know he was giving them certain injections. And the injections most likely contained certain types of drugs and hormones. We don't know exactly what they were. Some type of narcotic, most likely, or perhaps some type of opium or something like that. And perhaps that was one of Gurdjieff's favorite, kind of drugs that he had experience with. But Gurdjieff, one thing you have to understand about Gurdjieff as well is that he went to Tibet for many years and studied Tibetan medicine. So all of the psychedelic and different narcotic healing medicines that the Tibetans, Buddhists have, he was extremely familiar with all of those. So he knew all the kind of techniques as to how to use drugs and hormones to kind of elevate your consciousness in a specific way. And according to Gurdjieff, drugs in a spiritual practice can do a wide variety of things. They can help you see the future. They can help you remote view. They can help you, do telepathy. They can help you understand other languages. So there's a wide variety of things that you can do with drugs. And he said a lot of the times what they would do with drugs in these mystery schools where he was taught all these techniques is they would definitely do it sparingly, but like certain times you might use a drug to help someone see the future so they could see what they could become so that they would work towards that with certainty in their day-to-day life, something like that. Or, using it to predict certain, meaningful events, or, there's a wide variety of uses why you could use them. But so he was very skilled in the use of drugs. And so for this group of women in Paris, he gave them certain regimens of these injections. Some of the women said that it made them hot, like they had a fever. So it was kind of like hormonal flashes, those types of things. And then at certain times, he would tell them not to drink after giving them an injection, so that may indicate that it was like some type of hashish or opium product of some kind, but or not hashish, but some type of opium product. He did have a little bit of experience with hashish, but he preferred opium, I think, over hashish. But that was also, it was just a different time back then.
Of course.
But anyway, so he worked with these women, giving them these injections, and then he would give them special prayers and different spiritual exercises to them at the same time. And he was very clear to them that if the women did not perform these exercises exactly as he told them to, the drugs could become harmful in their system. So whether or not he was telling that to make them concentrate more, or whether or not there was really some risk involved, is kind of the question. But still, he was definitely giving them something. There's not really any records to say what it was, but we can make some guesses. So, so he worked with them for about 2 years, and there were many people that were watching them said that they advanced extremely quickly in their like psychic abilities and just states of consciousness that were way faster than any other Gurdjieff students. So they do work, but he was very cautious about it. He again, that was not a normal thing for he was not someone that would just kind of pull out drugs as the first step. It would have to be something very unusual for him to kind of go to that length to get you to past whatever issue that you're having. So
well, no, I find it very interesting because like with this conversation we're having right now, I mean, we look at a lot of these accounts throughout history of using these psychoactive compounds to achieve these higher states of consciousness. I mean, we can, as you were saying that, I was writing some things down. I mean, we look at the Oracle of Delphi, for instance, how she would supposedly huff this gas or ingest this type of gas from these chambers below. I don't remember the exact story 100%, but this would help give her visions and be able to communicate with the quote unquote archetypal gods, things like that. And I mean, even to the Bible, there's a lot of people who believe that when Moses was leading the Israelites through the desert and they were ingesting the manna that the divine was giving them, that this is potentially a form of a psychedelic, or potentially there's a lot of people who theorize that this was a psychedelic mushroom. And I mean, when we go to a lot of these ancient Gothic cathedrals in France and we look at some of this artwork that's depicted within this, we see Jesus Christ with mushrooms. The Last Supper was supposedly a Last Supper of mushrooms. So, I mean, you brought up a really big kind of debate in the spiritual community unintentionally as well. There's a lot of people who feel that you don't need these compounds to excel, and there's a lot of people like myself that, I feel like they can be beneficial in our spiritual evolution as well. I mean, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a double-edged sword. They can definitely be helpful. They can be hurtful. They can be neutral. It all depends on how they're used. And sometimes it's just pure accident. Like for me, it was pure accident. Like I wasn't intending for anything to happen. But, I think it could also be accidental that, someone has a schizophrenic break or something like that. So, I mean, like it all depends on your particular brain chemistry and your history as a person, and your emotional history, and the baggage and all that kind of stuff. So they're dangerous, but they're also potentially very useful. So I think we need to use them carefully, but I definitely think they're a net positive to society. And yeah, Gurdjieff also thought that, or was told by the people in his mystery schools, that like different psychedelics and different types of things like opium and things have been used for centuries in mystery schools to try to bring people. A lot of times they'd be used in ritual settings where you're doing them accompanied by a chant or some type of ritual, and it's kind of the purpose is to kind of give your emotions kind of that lift to rise and kind of connect with your body and your mind, and so that you become like in a unified state, as Gurdjieff would call it, like the objective state of consciousness. That was the whole idea of the ritual, is to try to evoke this sense of unity within the students, that they understood these mysteries.
I do resonate with your point a lot, because I feel personally that, yes, we do have those instances where it can be harmful. I've always felt that, it's good to know what you're looking to achieve. And I always felt like, at least, even though it is an exogenous experience, that they kind of give you a template. I don't know if you've ever heard it referred to this before as the 100th floor. There's a couple of ceremonial magicians who refer to that state of consciousness as the 100th floor. But nonetheless, man, I find your take very interesting. And the aspects of this, these compounds being used in mystery schools. Now, this is something I don't think a lot of people are aware of. I think a lot of people feel that the mystery schools were just a lot of rigid spiritual training, a rigid esoteric training, understanding the divine nature of reality. But if you don't mind me asking, do you happen to know which mystery schools did kind of imbibe in this kind of practice? Because there's another thing I want to ask you too, and see if you've done any research on this, because I've been looking myself, and maybe you know, I've heard that even in these ancient Gothic cathedrals, because they were built in cruciform, they were built in the sacred geometry of cruciform, that there was actually psychedelic rituals that went on in those behind closed doors. So I definitely want to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, specifically which mystery schools. There was a mystery school that Gurdjieff was a part of called the Saruman Brotherhood, and I don't know. I believe that he mentioned that might have been one of the ones that he experienced drugs at, but I'm not 100% sure. But then also, of course, there are lots of different, kind of Buddhist temples and mystery schools within Tibet, and that's a lot of where he learned his Tibetan, kind of medicine, healing, those types of things he learned there. And then I would imagine he probably picks some up from the Sufis as well. He spent a lot of time in different Sufi mystery schools. And I'm pretty sure I've read like articles that people think that psychedelics have been used in like the Greek mystery schools and like pottery. And I think we found like different types of psychedelic chemicals within like Jewish pottery and stuff like that in Jerusalem and stuff like that. So I'm pretty, just based on all of it's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but, it kind of adds up to, it seems like these people were definitely up to something.
I dig that. Because I think this is a very, whether it's be purposefully done or not, a neglected part of our history. I mean, it's not as neglected as I would say, as it's not advertised, but the depthful knowledge and the deep diving on these topics, it's very interesting how little we truly know and how much we can truly learn about this. So very awesome, man. I really dig your take on that and that information on that. So this is actually something I've been wanting to ask you too. This is just something I'm going to run by you. So I feel when we look at the spiritualities and the religious philosophies on the planet Earth right now, one thing I've noticed in a lot of these is we have little bits of truth when we're looking at the greater scheme of things, but we don't really in some way see what I would call whole truth. I mean, do you feel that esotericism could potentially be the closest to this truth that people like you and I are looking into or looking to explore and discover? Because I personally feel that way. I feel esotericism takes into account the non-dualistic nature of reality. And I want to get your thoughts on that as well, because I feel like right now what I'm seeing is a lot of debating and a lot of arguing that esotericism is evil. No, it's not, blah, 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 things like that. Of course, I don't feel that way, but I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that esotericism is evil. Esotericism is, I'm sure you're aware, just means hidden. And,
exactly.
I believe that, it's kind of like a hidden world that we don't see. And, if you can see into it, then you can see into the everyday world better than your average person. But of course, it depends on what you mean by esotericism. I mean, esotericism just in general, yes. But certain types of esotericism are obviously closer to the truth than others. But, I ultimately believe that, the highest truth is really unexpressible. But, the next highest truth is in, esoteric or more psychological truth, kind of a metaphorical truth. You get more meaning out of multiple layers than you do a single connotation, which kind of strips the meaning out of life, really. When you think about things in a logical way, what you're really doing is you're analyzing, not kind of experiencing what life really is. So
I dig that. No, and I'm with you, man. I do feel that the reason why I bring that up is, lately in our community, the spiritual community, it almost seems like the Christians and people like us seem to be combating over this. It's always been such a thing, and I just definitely wanted your clarification on that. I do feel that there are certain aspects of esotericism that are closer, but what I've always found funny though about this is that if you look at a lot of these different religions, and especially like we have Judaism. I mean, we have an esoteric, the Kabbalah, that is almost like what I would say an expansion pack to this philosophy.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
All
even
the
as you were
religions have the esoteric side to it. So if it's evil, why do all the religions keep, having them? Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think when it's coming down to the topic, it's looking at that from that objective format, and seeing that. I mean, you have these different expansion packs. I mean, even just as you were saying, Sufism and things like that, and then you have all the other different philosophies. I mean, you even have branches of Tibetan Buddhism that are just heavily entrenched in the esotericism and the mystery schools and things like that. And no, man, thanks for your thoughts on that. That's great clarification, because I think right now the biggest thing is we're almost seeing kind of like a little bit of the old age of Pisces kind of rearing its head right now at the age of Aquarius. And it's like all of the people who are still stuck in the Pisces mindset, they are real upset at us. And it's just
Right.
it's pretty interesting. I'm sure you've seen some of this go down yourself.
Yeah, and it's changing so quickly. It's kind of I'm sure it's giving people whiplash, kind of the change that's coming in society and just the different viewpoints that are coming in all at once. And yeah, I mean, I think that's partially why I'm doing this, is to try to shine a positive light onto esotericism for everyone, and to kind of simplify things so that people don't have to spend as long as I did trying to figure it out.
Absolutely, man. And that's great to do, because, I've always joked about this, like, we're very fortunate today to have, access to the information that we do as far as these spiritual books and these teachings. I always have used this joke. I mean, back in the early days, this kind of stuff took lifetimes. You would have to potentially, hop on a boat, take a month and a half, 2 month long boat voyage just to get to this country. And then you would have to hike up to this mountain plateau, to this to this monastery, just to get your hands on this one single spiritual book so you could analyze it and study it. But now you're absolutely right. It's the change is occurring very fast. And it's very interesting. And now, instead of having to take these very long boat voyages and hike up these mountain plateaus, we have access to all of this stuff at our fingertips. I find it quite magnificent, man. Very cool, very cool. So, I mean, how do you feel that this information is going to, I mean, even just the what I would say the resonant release of this information to people like you and I who are very interested in this, how do you feel this is going to affect the consciousness of the collective? I truly feel at this point, we're seeing what I would call subconscious aspects of an awakening occurring in a lot of other people. And, and how I feel about this is, I mean, I've seen so many people lately, just out of the blue, start getting into stuff like homesteading, being like self-sustainable, getting into like these different spiritual practices, people getting into ayahuasca retreats, things like this, and even though they don't have what I would say, or their focus is not on the bigger picture at hand, we're still seeing energetic, I guess you could say, aspects of our knowledge start to manifest in the collective around us. Have you experienced this, and do you feel that this is going to potentially, I guess you could say, accelerate as we continue to move forward into the age of Aquarius?
Yeah, I feel like we're in the middle of an acceleration, and I feel like we've probably been in one for a few years, but it's just now starting to become apparent to some people. But yeah, I think that consciousness is advancing quicker than it ever has. And there's some cautions there, but I think it's ultimately a positive thing. I think our intelligence may be getting a little ahead of our consciousness, to be honest with you. So that's like one worry I have, because, you know, intelligence, when it gets out of whack, can definitely be harmful. But yeah, I think that, are you familiar with the concept of the fourth turning, and like the Neil Howe generational theory and all that?
Yeah, the cyculums and the different
Yeah.
you know, the hero generations and things like that. Yes, I
Right.
have heard of that.
Yeah. So there's an interesting parallel, I think, to the psychedelic kind of revolution of the 60s, because that was, you know, if you look at the Neil Howe generational model, it's literally called, the second turning is literally called the awakening. And our awakening, which happened in the 60s and 70s by our prophets, which were, you know, people like Tim Leary and Ram Dass and a lot of the LSD and, you know, kind of psychedelic pioneers of the 60s and 70s, those were kind of our generational prophets of the kind of baby boomer generation. And here we are, you know, kind of nearing the end of the fourth turning. And a lot of the events that happen in the first and second turning and the awakening tend to echo in the fourth turning, which we're like right towards the tail end. We're probably like in the last, like, I think like 5 to 7 years of the fourth turning or something like that. So we're like right at the very end where all the explosive stuff is supposed to happen. So, and so yeah, I think we're right in the middle of an awakening, and I think that matches with just kind of the generational theories as well. We seem to be accelerating technologically. We seem to be accelerating from a consciousness perspective. We seem to be, you know, also events seem to be speeding up. I'm not sure as well if you're familiar with Terence McKenna and his idea of like novelty theory and that type of thing, but yeah, he predicted that, not that time would speed up, but that events in time would speed up after 2012, and that was kind of what the Mayan calendar was all about. And so I definitely think that we've seen a huge increase in the amounts of events, kind of the novelty through time speeding up after in the last, like, you know, a dozen years or so. And I think that's just gonna keep continuing for at least the next, you know, decade, or if not, you know, longer. So
Interesting, man, because you know, you brought up a very cool point. Because I'll send it to you when we get done tonight. In my very first season, I did a show on that book, the fourth turning. You know, I found it very profoundly fascinating, you know, on how it seems that we have these, what I would call energetic behavioral repetitions throughout these generations, and the different effects that seem to it almost seems as if, you know, I'm not meaning to throw simulation theory in here at all, but you brought up a very good point about, you know, Terence McKenna's theory on 2012, because, you know, I've kind of done a little bit of my own thing. So I joke that you know, December 21st, 2012 was not the end of the world per se, but it was I use this analogy, the downloading of an expansion pack onto our reality. And whether we call it the Human Awakening Test Run expansion pack, or we call it, you know, the Human Ascension test expansion pack, whatever we call it, but you're completely right, because if you look at everything before 2012, like, you know, yes, a lot of this was definitely still happening, but it was happening on a more subtle level. But then, you know, you look at everything that's occurred since 2012. I call it a cacophony almost. It's almost as if this acceleration just got kicked into full gear. So, I mean, you know, since we brought it up a little bit, you know, because it is kind of a hot topic that a lot of people in our community do talk about. I mean, do you feel potentially that we could be in some kind of simulated test run at this point in time? Or, you know, I joke and even call it maybe some kind of higher dimensional monitoring show. I don't really know what to put it. I mean, have you experienced anything like this? And what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do think of reality as a simulation in some regards, but not probably in the way that you're meaning it. But yeah, I mean, I think that reality is, how to best say this? Well, it's somewhat close to like the Indian concept of Maya or illusion. So, it's the world is a simulation in that it's a simulation of duality, because this world isn't actually dualistic. It's just one thing. So, in order to appear as two things or more than two things, a little kind of um, perceptual magic has to happen. And so that's what we're living in, is this age of we're really living in a magic self simulator, is what I call it, because it's simulating yourself. It is simulating the conditions of yourself, and it's simulating your responses to your character. And so it is bringing you experiences based on your karma, based on your how you will respond to this situation, and it can intelligently create events accordingly. And so people who try to escape the simulation, there is no escape. This is the only thing that's going on. So might as well enjoy it. But you can see beyond the illusion. You can see into the unity, and you don't have to be fooled by it. And that's my big thing, is to try to get people to understand that this is a simulation. It is it is not exactly real, but it is the realest thing there is, and it is worth participating in, and it is worth understanding that it's the illusion and the unity behind it. So
I'm with you on that, man. I think, you brought up a very, very good point that, I think we see a lot of. I see a lot of people in our community, like, like you were saying, escape the simulation. They like almost denounce their humanity. They're like, like, oh my God, I'm done being, it's like, I want to go back to the higher realms, and this. I'm like, well, embrace this experience, embrace it. I mean, you chose to be here and participate in what's going on right now, or you wouldn't be here. I mean, that's kind of like the nitty gritty of it, man. So like a great take, man. Great take. So, next thing I kind of want to kind of bring up to you is kind of tied towards a little bit of the lost civilizations and the ancient civilizations. And I am just dying to pick your brain because I saw, you did a couple of videos on this. What is your opinion of what could have possibly been Atlantis, and what could have potentially caused this fall from antiquity? I know there's a lot of people who said there was a cataclysm. I know there's a lot of people who think there was a war. I almost feel in some ways that there was almost like a sleight of hand or something that kind of brought us to where we're at today. So I would definitely like to get your thoughts on that, because this is a topic that I have just been ever so interested in, and it is one of my biggest things before I leave this planet, to figure out the real true history of humanity.
Yeah, this is a topic I've been pretty obsessed with as well, and it's hard to talk about without sounding completely insane.
I know, but it's all good. We're both insane here, or not insane. I mean, I definitely want to hear your thoughts, because it's good that you are on it just like I am.
Yeah. So, well, I guess first of all, I'll just talk about what Gurdjieff believed, and should we even believe Gurdjieff? Well, I don't think he had really any reason to lie about it. And if he was lying, it seems oddly weird that it matches up with a bunch of other evidence. But, okay, so what did he believe? So he believed that, and he said that he was taught this in his various mystery schools, that, essentially all the mystery schools were originated from a civilization that existed pre-Egypt. Now, he didn't call this civilization Atlantis. He just said it was a pre-Egyptian civilization. So, we can put whatever label we want on it. It could be a number of things. And, I think it's, Graham Hancock, because obviously we can talk about him, but he's had some books on this topic of, potentially a civilization that existing pre-Egypt, as well as some other people have talked about it as well. So there's definitely, I think, a lot more evidence in the last few years of that there there had been a civilization pre-Egypt, but Gurdjieff was talking about this back in like 1920. So it definitely way before any of this modern stuff came out. And so Gurdjieff said that, essentially all of the mystery schools and even all of the world religions like Hinduism and, Buddhism, different things like that, all originated from this one civilization. And they had this one religion. And they also had a very detailed kind of system of magic and development of the human organisms, both, physically and spiritually and emotionally and all that kind of stuff. And they had a lot of very good information that they put into these mystery schools, but the mystery schools weren't allowed to share it with the public, but they were allowed to share it with apprentices. So they would, find people that were worthy of receiving the knowledge, and they would teach these people through different cults or mystery schools, those types of things. Well, the problem is, as the years went along, a lot of that information became lost. Either the schools closed, or they had to move or go underground or something like that. So a lot of this this knowledge, which had been centralized and had been complete, became fragmented and kind of lost to time. And that's really what Gurdjieff was wanted to kind of remedy. He went around to all these different mystery schools and tried to recover all of these things, these remnants of this lost knowledge. And that's one of the one interesting fact is P.D. Ouspensky, who wrote In Search of the Miraculous about his time with Gurdjieff. The full title of that book is In Search of the Miraculous, Fragments of an Unknown Teaching. And that was suggested to him by Gurdjieff because he said that, he had found all these fragments of these ancient school teachings, but it wasn't complete. So there were missing parts to it. But that it, the pieces that he did find were extremely powerful. And Ouspensky spent the rest of his life trying to find more pieces from more mystery schools, beyond Gurdjieff. And, towards the end of his life, kind of almost gave up. And it was like, there's too much missing. I can't complete, the great work or whatever. But so there's obviously some type of very advanced civilization that could have produced this degree. We're not talking about Stone Age level of knowledge here. We're talking about an extremely advanced knowledge of psychology, of music, of astrology, of mythology. Like there's a huge amount of drugs and all kinds of other things that they had knowledge of, magic, a primitive, Stone Age society. No way would they have been able to engineer this complex of a system and also have it so uniformly distributed across the world. It's completely unthinkable that a primitive civilization could have accomplished that. So just that alone, I think, gives a lot of evidence. But then you add to the fact, different things like, the evidence of Graham Hancock and other, kind of archaeologists that have found things that question the narrative of how old our civilization actually is. There's like Göbekli Tepe and different things like that that were so, very specifically engineered way before we would have had the tools or knowledge to do such things. So, yeah. So what was it? What were they? What was going on? Obviously we don't know. My wild kind of crazy theory says it was probably aliens or something, but really, I am completely just kind of speechless as to what it could have been. But I think there is a good evidence that something was there.
We're in the same boat, basically. It's same with you, man. I've looked through a lot of this. I've looked through Graham Hancock. One of the things I want to ask you, do you think a lot of that information was burnt down in the Library of Alexandria? That's always something I've theorized, because in the Library of Alexandria there was supposed to be this information. They had almost a lot of this in completion, or at least in somewhere near a complete state. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that could have been a possible scenario as to why this library potentially got burned?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I don't know my what I suspect in my kind of suspicious conspiracy theory mind in the back of my mind is that um, a lot of information may have been destroyed over the years intentionally by the church, especially potentially also kings and stuff like that that wanted to claim like a divine right or something like that. If there was evidence of a previous civilization, of a different set of religion, of a different, religion that spawned your religion, those types of things, it suddenly delegitimizes you as a religion, as a monarch, all those types of things. So I think there are a lot of incentives for this information to get lost over the years. And I think that's probably what happened.
That's a great point, man. You really brought into play the human psychology aspect of this situation and the human nature aspect. I find that profoundly fascinating. But yeah, no, you and I are in the same boat on that, man. I mean, I don't know just as much as you. I've entertained the ideas that maybe it was humans potentially, but maybe a different type of human, maybe a different human format, maybe a different human experiment. I don't know, but nonetheless, man, I think. Did you hear that they did find the orichalcum though?
Yeah, in the shipwreck, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I thought that was a pretty awesome find because then it went from myth to maybe. At
Yeah, yeah,
that point,
exactly.
like that
And I
was
know that we had like small amounts of it in the past, but yeah, this was like the mother lode. And yeah, it's definitely very interesting that yeah, how else can you explain where this stuff came from? I mean, it's very hard to give a rational explanation other than Atlantis for this metal.
absolutely, man, absolutely. Wow. It's good to know that you're on it too, man. I'm still searching. If I find anything, I'll throw it your way. And most definitely if you find something, throw it my way. I would love to check it out. I mean, since we're on the topic,
Are you
what are your
familiar,
thoughts?
by the way? Sorry,
No,
while
go
we're
ahead. Yeah.
but are you familiar with Dolores Cannon?
Absolutely. I love
Yeah,
Miss Dolores.
yeah, her
Yes.
her stuff. I mean, obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt because I really don't know how much of her stuff to believe. But like, I don't necessarily distrust her, but I also am like, this seems like too too insane to be real. But if it is real, she does have some. I have listened to a couple of her books, and when she talks about Atlantis and the stuff that she talks about there is pretty wild. So if that stuff is true, it would be crazy.
Oh, absolutely, man. The one thing that I've come to find with people who, channel this information, it's always normally done through their perspective. I don't really find it to be, but I mean, nonetheless, I mean, definitely we can listen to it, 100%. And we can learn from it for sure. And that's one thing I've noticed is a lot of different people when they channel this information or they have a vision of it, it's always normally done through their subjective perspective. But I mean, to me, in my eyes, that's a beautiful thing in and of itself as well, and it's something that we all can appreciate. That's cool, about Dolores. While I got you on this topic, I mean, what are your thoughts on Tartaria? You know, I mean, people have been bringing up lately, a lot of the world's fairs and how we potentially had this, high technology even up until somewhat recently. And we talk about the fires, the big fires of the 1800s that burnt a lot of this down. And actually, believe it or not, I will send you these when we get done too. I actually have two peer-reviewed studies and maps on if Tartaria was a possible thing, but because it seems to be so absurd, to a lot of people. I mean, I just am curious on your thoughts. Do you think that maybe potentially this could have continued even till up until recent times?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I definitely wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if it did turn out to be true. I am a little more skeptical on this one
Mhm.
because, and I'll confess that I am not. I have not like jumped super deep down the rabbit hole, but I've like done some cursory reading of Tartaria, and um, so far what it feels like to me is that the main like confusion with the Tartaria seems to me.
Your mic.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yep, there we go. So no big deal, man. But what were you saying?
What I was saying is that the thing about Tartaria, it seems to me that the confusion may be coming from just the fact that we sucked as humanity, as map makers for, probably about 1,000 years. And we didn't really, we labeled things weirdly. The maps were just flat out wrong forever. Or they had funny labels that applied to a whole swath of civilizations that made no sense because we didn't know much about the world. So I suspect that, a lot of this Tartaria is just based on like old maps and things like that the people didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But again, I'm not an expert in it. I'm just a little more skeptical on this one. Now, when we start to talk about things like potentially caves under Tibet and potentially Mount Shasta and maybe some hollow earth type theory, I'm a little more like I'm a little more open to those types of things. But the Tartaria one, I haven't. I mean, maybe there's some. I just haven't seen good evidence for Tartaria yet. But I'm definitely open to the possibility. I'm just not super well versed in it. But what do you think?
Well, I'm with you, man. I completely agree with you. I don't think we know enough. I mean, I think personally that sometimes, it's a combination of things. I think that we as individuals on our spiritual evolution can be quick to jump on new ideas, and we can't really fault ourselves for that. But, we do have to at least, and that's one thing I think you and I resonate on quite a bit is we have to come from at least like a sound foundation of what we're trying to deliver, as far as this information. And could it have been a thing? I like you brought up earlier, the human psychology aspect. You unintentionally brought it up on how kings would have wanted this gone, because it would, derate them and make them seem less than because they were spawned from this. But I look at the human psychology aspect of it, and if it did exist, why would they want to erase it? Well, we look at high technology. I mean, we look at a potential ancient civilization. Those are two things that the high technology destroys, like $7 billion industries I can think of, like right off the top of my head. And us knowing a little bit more about our true nature, I mean, that's not beneficial to the machine. I mean, but I'm with you, man. I don't know, and I can say I don't know. And, and that's good that you can as well, because there's a lot of people who say they know, but they really don't know when it comes to this,
Yeah. And there's now I definitely think that there have been remnants of this civilization, like maybe pieces of tech or different things like that have been utilized by other civilizations throughout time to their advantage, kind of like the Nazi bell. You're familiar with that, I'm sure. And I was just listening to this other podcast about this guy talk about, and of course, who knows how much of this stuff could be real, but the fact that he was talking about how the Nazi bell may have been found by the Italians, and it was like experimented on by the Nazis and by the Nazis and the Italians, and they developed this free energy, kind of system, but then they hid it because oil companies, all this type of stuff. Yeah, I definitely think that there, things like that. There's different tech from either a previous civilization or potentially even like UFOs that have landed over the years and things like that we've just kind of confiscated and used. And potentially even things like the Ark of the Covenant could be a remnant of that civilization that they turned it into some type of deity or, something like that. But really, it's just this really ancient piece of technology that they figured out how to use.
I dig it, man. I dig it. No, and I think that's a very good viewpoint. I think there's definitely, we have evidence of some very interesting things, and it just leads us to ask these bigger questions about our true nature, man. I'm really enjoying your perspective, man. So let's hop into the occult category for a little bit. I want to pick your brain on this because this is something I've just been really big on based on my own experiences, and maybe you can resonate with this too. I feel like symbolism and symbols are what I would call the prime language of this reality. I feel that this is the case because we look at the symbolism that we experience here, natural and artificial symbolism that we experience here on this earth plane. And it seems to showcase just a widespread message. And the reason why I say this is because I say that symbolism would be the prime language of this reality, and written and spoken language would be secondary, because we can take two people from different countries, two different walks of life. They don't understand each other, but we can show them a common symbol and they will both understand that. So coming from an occult standpoint, we know how heavy symbolism is to the archetypes of the subconscious mind and triggering this energy of the subconscious mind. Do you feel that this could potentially be the case, that symbolism is truly the overall prime language of this reality, and we can see it showcased in so many different formats?
Absolutely. And symbolism not only stimulates the subconscious, but it also stimulates the higher centers as well. This was something that Gurdjieff mentions to Spinsky about mystery schools and how they tried to use. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Gurdjieff's kind of terminology, but he had something that was called the higher intellectual center and the higher emotional center. And so the higher intellectual center is kind of like it sounds, it correlates with the mind. And, the higher emotional center correlates with the heart. And so the higher emotional center is where things like intuition comes from. It's also where like empathy comes from. And it's, it connects you to love and, kind of faith and the higher emotions, those types of things. And then the higher intellectual center is, that's where it's still kind of like intuition, but it's more like mental intuition, and it's more like symbolic thinking and that type of thing. And a lot of like the higher ideas come from the higher intellectual center. And so in Gurdjieff's theory and Gurdjieff's system, symbols were used to stimulate the higher intellectual center, and mythology was used to stimulate the higher emotional center. And so they would try to use a combination of symbology and mythology to stimulate the higher centers so that it would kind of connect the subconscious with the higher self.
That's interesting. No, I so as far as Gurdjieff goes, I've dug into some of this stuff, but now you've kind of inspired me to dig a little bit deeper, because I really feel in some ways that this is a huge key to kind of getting a basis and an understanding of the magic of this reality. I feel that the divine rarely speaks to us in a literal sense. I mean, it will, don't get me wrong, but I feel like that it does try to communicate with us through this symbolism to a degree, even based on I'm sure you can resonate with this, the psychedelic experiences that you've had, the wide array of symbols that you would see in these archetypal figures and things like that. So I definitely am going to look into that, man. I do think that that these could be a key to a potential form of understanding, or maybe a deeper understanding of magic itself. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that magic ultimately is just energy transformation, and that being in touch with the higher centers and the lower centers and connecting those is the way that you can transform energy throughout your body, throughout your emotions, throughout your mind. When you become a channel for energy, you kind of remove some of the blockages that are within your energy system. You become more like a conduit for the kind of the ideas, the energy of the universe, love, all of these higher qualities start to come into you once you kind of open yourself up to that.
And I definitely agree. And that's something I've learned, in my dabbling of ceremonial magic and looking into that as well. And man, let me tell you what, I'm kind of curious now after speaking with you for a little bit. What kind of practices do you imbibe in? I mean, I would definitely like to hear, what you do, and maybe learn from it and maybe try to experiment with some of it myself. I mean, I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah. So I've dabbled in a lot of different things. I would say the biggest thing that I do is something called self-remembering. And we could really talk about self-remembering for hours, because it's one of those things I can say self-remembering, say, oh, cool. But really self-remembering is a incredibly complex, you could literally study it for a long time and not, get to the bottom of it for a long time. It's exactly what it is and what it means. But so anyway, so I that's kind of the main thing that I do is self-remembering, but I've also sprinkled in a lot of other things like I do some qigong exercises. I do some meditation. I do some energy work that I found from some other practitioners. There's this one guy, Baron von something. I'll have to look up that book in a second, but he's got a really good energy technique that I've been using. And then I've just kind of been, Gurdjieff had some techniques as well that involve kind of prayer to specific entities, kind of like ceremonial magic in some sense. I've also done like some different, like more like pagan type rituals, like Hecate magic and stuff like that, like different ritual magic. I've dabbled a little bit in like different things like chaos magic and things like that. So I've really dabbled in a lot of things, but what I keep coming back to is the Gurdjieff stuff, simply because it works. At least it works for me. I mean, I can't necessarily say it'll work for everyone, but it works for me, and I feel like it really combines a lot of things that I'm interested in. So like it's bridging. I really feel like Gurdjieff bridges the gap between awakening and magic in a way that is really profound. So like he's very much most of his techniques and kind of practices are geared towards awakening. However, he was also an extremely trained magician, both white and black magic and different mystery schools, and he could heal people. He could communicate telepathically with them. He could change his appearance on demand. There's a lot of very interesting stories that we could get into of like kind of magic that he was capable of performing. But he was all about energy transformation, and I think it's all about kind of the subtle energies, and you have to really be in tune with yourself in order to really tap into that deep level of magic, because it's so very subtle and based on your level of being. So if you try to do magic without a certain level of awakening, it's either going to backfire on you, or it's just not going to work. The way that you get magic to work is to be at a high enough level of your consciousness in order for it to work. So that's I think that Gurdjieff for me really bridges the gap between kind of being and doing.
Absolutely, man. No, and I'm definitely going to look into this more. You've inspired me. I've been looking for some new reading material as of late. So real quick, if I'm correct, is the self-remembering, now I heard this from this podcast I was listening to, correct me if I'm wrong, that the self-remembering is actually, or an aspect of it is remembering your day in reverse. I've heard of I'm not sure if that's exactly it. I'm just running that by you because I've heard of this practice that.
I think that you're talking about something. I think that was a Rudolf Steiner thing, if I'm not.
Yeah. So that was more of a Rudolf Steiner thing.
Yeah, and I think he would tell people to. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like either remember your day in reverse, or like try to remember tomorrow in reverse, or something like that, or play it out in reverse, or something like that. But no, this is a little bit different.
Okay.
And like I said, self-remembering is, we could really talk about it for hours, but I'll try to give you the basics. So
we can do a TLDR for sure.
Yeah. It's extremely psychological. So it's you, first of all, you do have to you have to have some knowledge of psychology, which is why it may be hard to like delve super deep into it. But basically what you have to do is to are you a meditator?
Absolutely
So,
every day.
kind of when you get into that like high level meditative state where you your mind is clear and you're in touch with your emotions, you feel you're deeply embodied in your body, and you just kind of have you can almost see the point where the outside mirrors the inside, or something like that. That kind of feeling that I'm talking about. So
absolutely.
That's self-remembering in a nutshell. That feeling, that's what you're trying to get to, but you're not trying to get to it in a meditative spot. You're trying to do it in the chaos of everyday life.
Very interesting.
So the point is, and this was one of Gurdjieff's ideas, is that you don't have to run to a monastery. You don't have to go to a cave to meditate for 10 years. The best place to do this is the chaos and the hustle of everyday life. Trying to just get a little bit better every second, every moment. Just try to remember yourself. And you don't have to succeed every time, but you just have to try. And the more you try, the more you're literally building. It's kind of like a muscle. You have a cognitive muscle called the task positive network, the TPN. This is cognitive neuroscience. So you have two systems in cognitive neuroscience that are very important. You have the TPN, the task positive network, and you have the DMN, the default mode network. So these two networks kind of work in contrast to each other. So when one is on, one is usually either off or way subdued. And so the DMN is where you get your like cloud of thoughts, cloud of unconscious thoughts, the associative thoughts that come into your mind. A dog barks and it makes you think of when your dog died, or something like that. It's just like that's the associated mind that's associated with the default mode network. Then the task positive network is correlated to your cognitive thinking ability. It's like your task oriented, kind of what we're engaging right now to engage in this conversation. It's very task oriented. Now, when the task oriented network is engaged, the default mode network is off, right? And so that you become more conscious when the task positive network is engaged. But the problem is it's not engaged all that often because it's in energy saving mode. Your mind is naturally lazy because it's trying to conserve energy. So it's going to allow the subconscious to act automatically because it's trying to save energy. You can't be conscious all the time because you will just run out, you'll drain your battery and you'll run out of energy. So your subconscious is trying to save you energy. So what self-remembering is doing is it's building up that muscle of task positive network energy, and it's giving you more and more conscious energy that you can build a feedback loop to where you can build up your task positive network so high that your default mode network will be off by default. And so your associative mind will be off. You'll have more time for conscious thought, and you won't have these pesky, negative, intrusive thoughts running around your mind all the time. It's great. So, so self-remembering kind of builds this practice of building your conscious energy, raising your level of awareness and, kind of giving you more cognitive, executive function to do, your stuff during the day.
Dude, this is amazing. I'm learning so much. Thanks for this, man. And you know what this reminds me of? I don't know if you've heard of the yogic concept for the state of samyama. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but basically what that is it's very similar to what you're talking to. It's a form of divine focus. It's a form of self-remembrance, and I find it very interesting that Gurdjieff he has almost he's almost pulled this. He's, due to him being a high level magician, he's like almost pulled this out of the collective unconscious mind, and he's put this. I think it's fantastic, man. Like, it's really cool. And you've definitely you've taught me this, man. I'm definitely going to be looking into this quite a bit. I'm now highly interested, but no, to me, I see a very huge comparison in the yogic state of samyama. It's almost bringing that meditative state into the waking life, the everyday world.
Exactly.
And yeah,
it's a cheat code. The cheat code is attention. If you truly understand what attention is, you truly understand that it's the biggest cheat code. Because Gurdjieff used to tell his students that if you come out of my teachings not understanding, not bettering your understanding of attention, you've pretty much wasted your time, because that's all we're doing here. We're just learning about attention. And so if you can learn about attention, if you can harness attention, if you can, embody your attention in all the different areas where you have it, that's really the goal. And that's the cheat code to spirituality, to enlightenment, to a lot of things. And I think that's what he discovered and what he was trying to pass on.
I would agree. And again, that that lines up, because samyama is a divine focus. And when we think of, focus, we think of attention. I mean, that comes definitely into play with this, man. And I gotta say, I always call this, it's interesting when we look at these different, spiritual concepts and these different things. I call it like almost this reciprocating Ouroboros between a lot of different other, spiritualities. They all have their different take or their different spin on it, but what we do see is this overall underlying concept, and I think you lined that out beautifully, man. I think you did that very well. And as we kind of start to wind down a little bit, excuse me on that. My question to you is this. This is going to be one of my final ones. Do you feel that we are, in a lot of ways, essentially already, I guess you could say, we're already there as being ascended or enlightened beings? We're just remembering our way back to it. Now, I've always coined this saying, at first you awaken and then you remember. And I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts on that, because I know you've had psychedelic experiences as well. Do you feel that it's that a lot of this information already lies within us, and it's just a way of remembering that it's there? And I've been looking at it more from this perspective lately, as opposed to achieving more knowledge and acquiring more information, but just remembering that it's already there. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's I think been a pretty hotly debated topic for a long time, because and I actually made a tweet about this a few hours ago, where I said something like, type of guy who is trying to liberate all sentient beings versus the type of guy who says everyone's already enlightened. And those two types of kind of gurus are out there, and they seemingly contradict one another, but I really think that they both contain a grain of truth. It is true that everyone is already enlightened, and that everything here is just kind of Maya, and we're just all kind of participating in it. Nothing we really do matters or adds up to anything, because it's all just everything is already kind of decided and is already won, and this is just kind of a distraction. But on the other side, you could say, but yet we're incomplete. This was Gurdjieff's, kind of point of view, is that everything may be perfect, but mankind was made incomplete. So we have to finish ourselves. That's the goal of humanity. It's not that we're imperfect. It's that we're unfinished. And so we do have to finish ourselves, but in some way we are already finished and not finished at the same time. So it's a weird paradox. But I think we have to understand that there's this certain non-dual perspective and there's the dual perspective, and we live in, they are the same world, but they're also slightly different worlds. So we have to take them slightly differently. And in the dualistic world where we are imperfect and or at least we're unfinished, and we have to continue working on ourselves. But at the same time, there is a level where everything is perfect. There's nothing to do and no one to be enlightened, and no reason to be enlightened because this is all just happening. So I think both perspectives have their own grain of truth, and I think it's kind of being at peace with everything, with whatever, no matter what happens, but also keep trying, keep being embodied, keep being active, keep being hopeful. That's really all you can do, and you have to live in both of those worlds. And so, I don't really know what it means, but I'm just trying to my best to survive.
I'm digging it, man. No. And this is why we do this, man. And I mean, this is the place to get freaky woo woo. You know what I mean? This is the place to dive into those topics, man. And I've got to say, the one thing I want to say before we start to wind down for sure is, man, I'm going to tell you what, you've impressed me tonight. From the outside, when I saw you, I saw you had some base memes, and I saw that you were, very in tuned, man. But I got to tell you what, getting the chance to sit down here and actually chat with you and pick your brain and get to hear like your real in-depth, deep dives and your perspectives on this, man, you've taken it to a next level, man. And, and the one thing I'm going to say is, it's not very often I get really impressed by a guest, man. And definitely impressed me tonight for sure. And I want to say this to you, man, because, I feel like nobody says it enough, and I'm trying to change this for the better. And I want to say thanks for what you do, bro. Like, seriously, thank you for what you do. It definitely means something. And it definitely is noticed, and you're definitely taking your part and helping contribute to this collective, man. And I know it's not said enough, and I just wanted to tell you that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that means a lot.
No worries, man. So real quick, I will have you stick around just for a couple minutes afterwards. So, excuse me. I have your YouTube channel and your X link to your X account at the bottom of both the Rumble description and the YouTube description. But if there's anywhere else people can find you and have a listen to what you do, let them know now.
Yeah, I do have a small Instagram page, but I'm not super active there. But you can find me there. But that's currently all my places at the moment.
Awesome, man. Well, you want to know what, Tyler? Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come sit down here and talk with me, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. Guys, I will be back next week with a very special guest who I've been trying to get on the show for a while. His name is Alex Freeman, a former Anon, PhD on Capitol Hill. I will be having him on to discuss his thoughts about the current world stage incident at this current time. It is going to be a very fun show. I think it's going to be a great time, and you guys are going to enjoy Mr. Alex, as he states he would like to be called, Alex Mo fucking Freeman. But nonetheless, guys, thank you again for joining me for another BG-Cast Wednesday live podcast. Go check out The Fourth Way on YouTube, guys. Give him a follow on X. You will not be disappointed. And other than that, everybody, have yourselves a great night and take care. And thanks again.
Thank you.